Today we're going to learn about solving one-step inequalities. The good news is when we learn how to solve one-step equations, we're going to use the same method to solve one-step inequalities. So that's the answer to our first blank. Solve inequalities just like equations. And when we solve equations, our first step is to show the inverse operation, and you have to write it correctly. Remember, we don't use x's for multiply because it can be variables, and we use a fraction bar for division. One difference is that we are going to graph the solutions for these problems on a number line, but we've already practiced that as well. Okay, here we go. We have our variable on the left. That's where we like it generally. This is multiplication, so we're going to do the opposite and divide. Use your fraction bar. If they're multiplying by 7, what are we going to divide by? I hope you said 7. And then 7 divided by 7 makes 1, and 1x is just an x. Bring down your inequality. You don't have to do anything to that. And then just come out to the side and do your division. 7 into 154. And that tells us that x is less than 22. Now we're not going to be doing the check steps because it's a little tricky with these. Because, for example, if I were to put 22 into this equation to check it, it wouldn't check because the solution says it has to be greater than 22. So you could pick any number greater than 22, substitute it in, and it would check. You know how to check. If you feel like you're not getting it right, then definitely use the check step. Now we're going to graph, because the direction said to solve, we did that, and graph on a number line. Remember that your number line should have arrows on the end. 3 numbers on your number line at least. The solution goes in the middle, and then you fill in the other 2 numbers. Alright, do we need to put an open or closed circle? Well, I hope that you said open because it isn't equal to 22, but we want as close as possible to 22. And now this says x is greater than 22, so we're going to shade in the direction where all the numbers are greater than 22 and include that arrow. Now be very careful if you're using your pencil. Make sure this is dark enough for your teacher to read. They're not going to guess, ooh, did they shade or did they not? Make sure it's large enough so they don't have to guess. And that's all there is to it, guys. Alrighty, let's look at the next one. We have negative 149 is less than or equal to negative 13 plus n. So our n is on, and our variable is on the right side. We don't usually like that, but you know what? It is what it is. It has to stay there. So what is happening to n? Okay, they're adding a negative 13. All right, so the opposite would be to subtract a negative 13. But when you subtract a negative, you know, you fix that and it will be a plus. The shortcut is to look at this number and just do the inverse of that. So we're going to add 13 on the right. We're going to add 13 on the left. Okay, a negative and a positive of the same number cancel out to 0, and n plus 0 gives us n. You've isolated your variable. Keep your symbol. Now we're going to add this together. So 149 plus 13, 12, 6, 1. Now, ooh, that's too close. You don't want your math to get sloppy because if you can't read what's going on, that's where a lot of careless mistakes are made. Okay. Now, when we were graphing, we always said the variable should be first. So remember, variable first. Otherwise, you're more than likely to graph it incorrectly. So flip it over. And your solution will then be n, and 162 is over here, and we're going to flip this symbol as well. N is greater than 162, so I need to box that. I forgot to do that over here. When you get into higher math classes, your teachers are only going to look at your graph anyway, but that's not what we're doing, so make sure you box your final solution. All right, 162 goes in the middle, 163 here, and 161 here. Open or close circle, look at your inequality. It says or equal to, so it includes the 162, which means you're going to have a closed circle, and we're going to shade where it's greater than. Okay, a lot of people have found a shortcut with graphing inequalities. They said, oh, the arrow on the inequality is the arrow on the number line, and that's where you shade it. Well, that only works when the variable is first. If you look here, that is why we have you flip it around. We don't read backwards. We want to know what's happening to n. If you don't flip it, you would have shaded it in this direction, thinking less than, but that's not going to get you the right graph. All right, here we go. Now this one is different. They are dividing by a -2. So we're going to multiply by -2. Don't change this sign. This is not your operation. So we're going to multiply by a -2 over 1. Multiply by a -2. All right. Well, when we do that, look what happens. We're going to cancel these and make 1s. And then we're left with a negative times a negative, which is a positive x. Going to hold on to that sign for a minute. And 9 times a -2 is a -18. Okay? If we bring this sign down, I want you to watch what happens when we check it. It says x is less than -18. So if we check, we should be able to substitute something less than -18 into this equation, and it works, hopefully. So when we pick something less than -18, well, that could be -19. And a -2. Now, 2 goes into 19. 9.5 times, right? Yes. And negative divided by a negative is a positive. Is 9.5 less than 9? It doesn't check, and we did not mess up. This is the trick. Okay, you're going to have to flip this around. That is what is very different. So I'm going to make it really large and in a different color. Okay, and that's what this note is. When you multiply or divide by a negative number, you must flip the inequality symbol. Here, we flip the entire inequality to make the variable on the left. Here, since I multiplied by a negative number, I have to only flip that sign. The variable's already on the left, so you don't have to do anything else. That is your solution. And if we were to check that, let's see what happens. We checked something greater than negative 18. Well, that would be negative 17. Why don't we pick something nice? Because we're going to divide by 2. Let's make it an even number. Negative 16 divided by 2. Negative 2, it's 9. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And is the limit. I'm messing up. Hold on. See? These pens are fabulous. Alright, so the original says less than, so you have to use that symbol, and 8 is less than 9. It checks. Okay? Huge note. Make sure you pay attention to that, and you won't go wrong. Alright, I want you to give the next one, number 4, a try, and pause the video, come back when you're done. Okay, so I really hope that you remembered that when you're subtracting a negative, you need to rewrite it using the additive inverse, and then you can solve it. And again, you're going to use a closed circle and shade to the left because it's left. I got so excited about teaching you the trick up here, we forgot to graph this on the number line. So let's take a look. Make sure you're putting arrows on the ends. Negative 18 is in the middle. Now, a lot of people have trouble numbering these at first. You've got to remember 0 is way down here on the number line. So it would be 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, so on. So this would be negative 17, and this is negative 19. Open circle, and we're going to shade it to the right. Anything greater. Okay, so now I'm going to let you do the last two. Pause the video, come back when you're finished. Alright, so here are the answers to the last two. I did want to point out on here, you are dividing by a negative. Do not change this sign. That is not your operational sign. The operation is multiply, so we're dividing by exactly what they're multiplying by. When you multiply or divide by a negative number, you've got to flip this symbol. So that's why I made it extra large. You can always double check your solution just with some quick mental math on ones like these. Since it says m is less than 12, well, you know 0 would work, and it's not too far from the real answer. So what is negative 12 times 0? 0, you're right. And is 0 greater than negative 144? Well, it sure is. Be careful on this one. You're not going to flip here. Don't flip the inequality, because we aren't dividing by a negative. We're dividing into a negative, not dividing by a negative number. We're dividing into, so you don't flip the inequality symbol on that one. So there's lots of little places where you can make some careless mistakes. Make sure that you slow down, follow your rules for solving equations. There is the little tricks, though. You've got to make sure your variables first, and what I was emphasizing is that you're going to flip the entire solution step when your variable's not first. The other the other key factor in these are that when you multiply by a negative or you divide by a negative, you have got just to reverse the inequality symbol itself. All right, well, good luck.